Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are not just doing a history lesson, no. We are doing a strategic demolition of one of the most important high-yield topics for the UPSC Civil Services examination.
Oh, absolutely.
We are talking about the golden age of medieval India, the Mughal Empire.
It's a massive topic, and, it can feel really overwhelming, but we aren't just going to recite dates and battles. That's not what this is about.
No.
We are going to decode the logic of the empire, how it was built, how it ran, and how it fell apart. And we're looking strictly at the Tamil Nadu board class Exaya history textbook, specifically chapters 20 and 21.
Exactly. And the reason we are doing this, the reason we're focusing so narrowly, is that for any serious UPSC aspirant, these chapters are, well, they're the holy grail.
They really are.
If you look at the trends, the questions coming from this specific text are just undeniable.
And we are going to link this directly to previous year questions, or PYQs, as we go, because knowing the history is one thing, right? But knowing how the commission asks about that history.
That's the whole game.
That is where the game is won.
Okay. So before we jump into the battlefield of Panipat, I have a humble request. If you are listening to this, you are likely looking for that edge in your preparation. We put a massive amount of work into curating these deep dives. So please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel. It costs you nothing, but it helps us immensely.
And if you find value in this, if this helps you crack a difficult concept or, get that extra mark in prelims, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It allows us to keep the lights on and keep bringing you this high-quality, ad-free breakdown.
It really does. And a huge shout-out to our current supporters. You folks are the real Mansabdars of this operation. You make it possible.
Thank you so much.
Also, you know the drill. Smash that like button and leave a comment. Tell us what you think. And for the serious learners, we have free notes with practice PYQs available on our public Telegram channel.
And for those who want a full arsenal, I'm talking detailed notes, extra PYQs, and model mains answers, check out the private Telegram library. Just DM us on the public channel to join.
All right, housekeeping done. Let's get into the meat of it. The mission today is simple. We are synthesizing political history from Babur to Aurangzeb.
All the way.
We're breaking down the administrative systems like Mansabdari and land revenue and exploring the cultural zenith. We need to answer, how did they build such a massive empire and why did it eventually crumble?
It's a narrative of foundation, consolidation, peak, and then overextension. And it all starts in 1526.
The First Battle of Panipat. This is the entry point.
Yeah.
Babur versus Ibrahim Lodi. Now, on paper, this shouldn't have been a win for Babur, right? He was seriously outnumbered.
Statistically, no. It should have been a walkover for Lodi. He had the resources of the Delhi Sultanate, a massive army, war elephants, the whole 9 yards. But Babur had two things that completely changed the face of Indian warfare: artillery and gunpowder. This is the whole gunpowder empire theory in action. The Tamil Nadu text highlights this very clearly.
So it wasn't just having the guns, it was how he used them.
Precisely. He used them tactically with his cavalry. He employed what's called the Tuluma tactic, which is basically a flanking maneuver. He'd pin the enemy center with his carts, the Araba, and then his fast-moving cavalry would sweep around and attack from the sides and the rear.
So Lodi's army was basically trapped.
Completely trapped and then pounded by artillery. The elephants, which were supposed to be Lodi's trump card, panicked from the sound of the cannons and ended up trampling his own men. It was a tactical masterpiece.
And Babur was a product of his lineage, wasn't he?
Yeah.
The text mentions his background.
It does. It notes he was related to Timur on his father's side and Chinggis Khan on his mother's side.
Yeah.
That is a heavy, heavy pedigree of conquest. He grew up in the brutal school of Central Asian warfare.
Talk about having big shoes to fill. And he wasn't just a warrior, right? The man could write.
Yes, and this is a key cultural point for prelims. You absolutely have to know this. He wrote his autobiography, the Tuzuki Baburi.
Also known as the Baburnama.
Right. And the language is crucial here. This is a potential trap question.
It wasn't Persian.
No. He wrote it in Turkish, his mother tongue specifically Chagatai Turkic. It was only later, during Akbar's reign, that it was translated into Persian, which became the official court language.
And what's it like, as a text?
It's incredible. It's so candid. He gives his frank opinions on India, its people, its climate. He complains about the heat and the dust. It gives us a very human, very personal look at the founder of this massive empire.
So Babur sets the stage, a brilliant but brief reign. He dies young in 1530. Then comes his son, Humayun. And honestly, Humayun's reign feels like a bit of a roller coaster.
That's putting it mildly. He loses the empire, wanders in exile for 15 years, and then, almost by a miracle, he gets it back.
And this break, this gap in the Mughal line is what's called the Interregnum.
Exactly. And this break is crucial because it gives us one of the most underrated, most brilliant figures in all of Indian history, Sher Shah Suri.
The founder of the Sur Empire. I feel like Sher Shah often gets glossed over. He's just this placeholder between Babur and Akbar.
He is, and that's a huge mistake.
But the text suggests he was actually the architect, the one who laid the groundwork for the administrative system that Akbar later became famous for.
That is a very fair assessment. I'd go further. If you look at the administrative reforms, Sher Shah is the unsung hero. He ruled for only about 5 years, from 1540 to 1545, a ridiculously short time. But what he accomplished in those 5 years is just staggering.
Okay, so let's unpack those reforms because this is high-yield territory for prelims. What did he actually do? Let's go point by point.
First, land revenue. He didn't just have his officials guess how much a piece of land could produce. He introduced a systematic survey and measurement of land. He fixed the state's share at 1/3 of the average produce.
Which brought predictability.
Predictability for everyone. The peasant knew what he had to pay, and the state knew what it would receive. It cuts down on corruption.
Okay, so land revenue. What's next?
Infrastructure. He is the man behind the arterial road network, a true visionary.
The Grand Trunk Road. Everyone's heard of that.
Yes, but that was just one of 4 major highways he built or upgraded. The text specifies the most famous one ran from Sonagon in Bengal all the way to Sindh in the northwest. That is a massive logistical backbone for an empire.
And it wasn't just a road, was it?
No. He built rest houses, or sarais, every 2 coasts, which is about 8 kilometers. These were fortified inns. They had separate lodgings for Hindus and Muslims. They served food. They had watchmen. They were the nerve centers of the empire.
So they helped with trade, troop movement, and communication.
Everything. The sarais also functioned as post offices. This is how the imperial mail system worked. It was brilliant.
Okay, so land, roads, what else?
Currency. This is huge. He standardized the coinage. Before him, it was a mess. He introduced a standard silver coin, the rupee, and a copper coin called the dam. And he fixed the exchange rate.
That's vital for a commercial economy, isn't it?
You can't have trade flourishing if every town has a different coin with a different value. This standardization lubricated the wheels of commerce across the entire region. The modern rupee owes its lineage directly to Sher Shah's reform.
Amazing. And what about law and order? I remember reading something about village responsibility.
This is a fascinating concept. He used the principle of strict liability. If a crime or a robbery happened within the jurisdiction of a village, the village headman, the muqaddam, was held personally responsible.
Wow.
He had to produce the culprit or pay the compensation for the loss himself.
That sounds incredibly harsh.
It was harsh, but it was incredibly effective. It basically forced the local community to police itself. The text mentions that chroniclers of the time wrote that an old woman could travel with a basket of gold on her head and no one would dare touch her.
That's a powerful image. Before we leave Sher Shah, we have to mention his architecture.
Oh yes, the Purana Kila, the old fort in Delhi, and his own mausoleum at Sasaram in Bihar.
Which is a masterpiece.
It really is. It's a massive, powerful stone dome standing in the middle of an artificial lake. It perfectly combines the strength of Afghan architecture with the grace of Indian design. It's a statement piece.
Okay, so Sher Shah dies in a gunpowder accident. His successors are weak, and Humayun sees his chance. He comes back, reclaims the throne, but then promptly trips down his library stairs and dies.
A rather ironic end for a man whose name means the fortunate.
And that brings us to the main event,
Ah,
Akbar, 1556 to 1605.
the great consolidator. And he starts as a boy king, really. He's only 13, maybe 14, when he ascends the throne. He's a kid.
And immediately he has to fight for his life. The Second Battle of Panipat, 1556.
Right, against Himu, or Hemchandra Vikramaditya. Himu was the commander of the Afghan forces, and he had actually seized Delhi and Agra. He was on the verge of reestablishing an Afghan Hindu empire in North India.
And what happened? The Mughals were on the back foot.
They were. Himu's army was larger, he had more elephants, but in the heat of the battle, the text says a stray arrow pierced Himu's eye. He went unconscious, his army saw him slump in his howdah, and they panicked. They broke and ran.
A stroke of luck for the Mughals, perhaps.
A huge stroke of luck. But it secured the throne. Initially, of course, Akbar is under the regency of his tutor, Bahram Khan, a powerful figure.
But once he comes of age and takes full control, we see the emergence of a distinct and brilliant Mughal policy.
We do, and the cornerstone of that seems to be his relationship with the Rajputs.
This is where it gets really interesting. Was it just that Akbar was a nice, tolerant guy? Or was there a deeper strategy here?
It was pure, unadulterated strategy. You have to understand the geography. To rule North India effectively from Delhi and Agra, you cannot be in a state of perpetual war with the warrior clans of Rajasthan. They are your immediate neighbors.
They control the trade routes.
They control the routes to the rich ports of Gujarat and also down into the Deccan. Fighting them constantly would be a drain on resources and manpower. So Akbar chose a different path.
So if you can't beat them, marry them.
In a way, yes. The matrimonial alliances were a masterstroke. He married the daughter of Raja Barmal of Amber, which is modern-day Jaipur. But it wasn't just marriage, it was integration.
What do you mean by that?
He didn't force his Rajput wives to convert to Islam. He gave them full religious freedom within the palace. And more importantly, he gave their male relatives high positions in the nobility, high mansabs.
Like Raja Man Singh and Raja Bhagwan Das.
Exactly. These men weren't just vassals, they were senior generals and governors in the Mughal Empire. They were stakeholders. Their fortunes were now tied to the success of the empire.
Man Singh even led the Mughal army against other Rajputs.
He did. The famous Battle of Haldigati in 1576. It was Raja Man Singh commanding the Mughal forces against the defiant Rana Pratap of Mewar. This shows just how successful Akbar was in co-opting a large part of the Rajput aristocracy into the Mughal steel frame.
Of course, Rana Pratap is the great symbol of resistance. He never submitted.
Never. He fought a guerrilla war from the hills for years. But Mewar was the exception. Most of the other Rajput states accepted Mughal suzerainty.
Okay, let's look at the flip side of this, the religious policy. This is probably what Akbar is most famous for.
And it's an evolution of thought. It's not a static policy. He starts as a fairly orthodox young ruler, but he becomes more and more curious, more eclectic.
And he takes some really concrete steps.
He does. In 1563, he abolishes the pilgrim tax, which was levied on Hindus visiting their holy sites. A year later, in 1564, he abolishes the jizya, the poll tax on non-Muslims. These are huge economic and symbolic concessions to the Hindu majority.
And then he builds the Ibadat Khana, the house of worship.
Right, at his new capital, Fatehpur Sikri. This is just fascinating. He builds this hall, and initially he just invites Sunni scholars to debate, but they just squabble and fight amongst themselves.
So he opens it up.
He opens the doors to everyone. Not just different sects of Islam like Shias and Sufis, but Hindu Brahmins, Jain monks, Parsi priests, even Christian Jesuits from Goa. He wants to hear them all debate. He's searching for truth.
It sounds like a medieval TED Talk stage, but probably with more shouting.
There was definitely conflict. The Orthodox ulemas, the religious scholars, were not happy about losing their monopoly on truth. They saw their authority being challenged.
Which leads to the Infallibility Decree in 1579. What does that actually mean? Infallibility.
It's a bit of a misnomer. It didn't mean he was a prophet. It essentially asserted Akbar's authority as the supreme arbiter in religious disputes. If the ulemas disagreed on a point of Islamic law, Akbar's interpretation, guided by the good of the state, would prevail.
So he was reducing the political power of the clergy.
Precisely. He was making the state supreme over the church, so to speak.
And all this culminates in Din Ilahi, the divine faith.
Yes. And this is so often misunderstood. The textbook is clear. It wasn't a new religion. It was more of a syncretic philosophy or a code of conduct for a small group of his closest nobles.
And it was based on what?
Reason and the concept of sulikul, which means peace with all, or universal peace. It took good ideas from all religions. It had no priesthood, no holy book, no rituals. It was an ethical system.
And it didn't really catch on, did it?
No. The tell notes it had very few followers, maybe only 15 or 18, including his courtier Birbal. It wasn't a mass movement. It was more like an elite order of loyalty centered on the emperor himself.
Speaking of this cultural blending, there's a specific PYQ linkage we need to hit here. The 2022 prelims had a question about the translation of texts.
Right, good point. The question was about the translation of the Sanskrit text Yoga Vasistha into Persian, and the answer linked to Nizamuddin Panipati during Akbar's reign.
So this reflects a broader trend.
A huge trend. Akbar established a translation department. The Mughals, especially starting with Akbar, were obsessed with understanding the culture of the land they were ruling. They commissioned Persian translations of the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Atharva Veda, the Upanishads.
So culture and politics are mixing. But an empire runs on money and soldiers. We have to talk about the steel frame of the administration. This is segment 3, and for our listeners prepping for mains, this is your absolute bread and butter, the Mansabdari system.
This is the unique institution of the Mughal Empire. There was nothing quite like it. It unified the civil and military administration into a single hierarchy. Every single officer of the state, from a low-level functionary to a top general, was given a rank, or a mansab.
And this rank had 2 numbers attached to it, or Zat and Sawar. I feel like this trips people up all the time. What is the difference?
Okay, let's simplify it. Zat is your personal status. It determines your salary and your precedence in the court. Think of it as your pay grade. If you have a higher Zat, you are a bigger deal, you stand closer to the emperor, and you get a bigger paycheck.
Okay, so Zat is the paycheck and the prestige. Simple enough.
Correct. Sawar, on the other hand, is the military obligation. It indicates the number of cavalrymen, horsemen, and horses you are required to maintain for the emperor's service.
Well, if I'm a Mansabdar with a rank of 5,000 Zat and 3,000 Sawar...
It means you get the salary and status of a 5,000 rank noble, but you are obligated to maintain and present for inspection a contingent of 3,000 fully equipped horsemen.
And how were they paid?
They were either paid in cash from the royal treasury, or, more commonly, they were assigned a Jahangir, a piece of land whose estimated revenue was equal to their salary.
But it wasn't a feudal system.
No, and this is a crucial distinction. The Mansabdar only had the right to collect the revenue from his Jahangir to pay his salary. He didn't own the land. He had no administrative power over it. And importantly, the system wasn't hereditary.
Right.
When a Mansabdar died, his rank and his Jahangir reverted to the state. His son didn't automatically inherit it. The emperor appoints, promotes, and dismisses at will. This prevented the rise of independent feudal lords who could challenge the throne.
It's a system of centralized control. But how do you pay all these guys? That brings us to land revenue.
The backbone of the entire economy. And the name to remember here, the architect of the system, is Raja Todar Mal.
Akbar's finance minister, a genius.
He implemented what's known as the Zabti or Bandobast system. But the real innovation, the thing that made it so stable, was the Dashala system, introduced in 1580.
Dashala implies 10 years, right? Da is 10.
Exactly. Instead of measuring the land and fixing the price of produce every single year, which is a bureaucratic nightmare.
And open to corruption.
Absolutely. They calculated the average yield and the average price of each crop over the last 10 years and fixed the state's share 1/3 based on that average. It provided stability for both the state and the peasant.
And they didn't just tax all land equally, did they? They classified it.
No, that would be unfair and inefficient. They had 4 very logical categories based on fertility and the continuity of cultivation.
Okay, what were they?
First, you have polage. This is the ideal land, cultivated annually, never left fallow. This is your prime real estate. Second, parauti. This land is left fallow for 1 or 2 years to recover its fertility.
Makes sense.
Third is chachar, which is left fallow for 3 to 4 years. And fourth is banjar, which is uncultivated for 5 years or more. And the state offered concessions to bring this banjar land under the plow.
This level of detail shows how sophisticated the administration was. They weren't just grabbing cash. They were actively managing the agricultural life cycle of the empire.
And while we're on these specific revenue terms, we need to flag a PYQ from 2021, the term Marasadar.
Oh, good catch. That was one of those matching questions, right?
It was. And Marasadar refers to a designated revenue payer to the state. It's a term you find more in the Deccan or South Indian context, but it's important to know how it contrasts with the Mughal terminology we just discussed. Understanding these specific terms, polage, parauti, Jahangir, Marasadar, is often the difference between clearing prelims and missing the cutoff.
Okay, so we've built the foundation with Babur, solidified it with Akbar, and set up the administration. Now we enter the era of opulence, the cultural zenith, Jahangir and Shah Jahan.
This is where the empire stops fighting for survival and starts, well, showing off its wealth and refinement.
Jahangir, ruling from 1605 to 1627. He seems less interested in conquest and more interested in, well, art and nature. Aesthetics.
He was a connoisseur, a true aesthete. Under Jahangir, Mughal painting reached its absolute climax. He was a patron with an incredible eye. He moved away from the busy manuscript illustration style of the Persian school.
And toward what?
Toward realism, naturalism, portraits. He loved nature.
He was obsessed with it.
He really was. He would have his artists paint any rare bird or animal that was brought to his court. He commissioned artists like Ustad Mansur, who was a genius at painting flora and fauna. There's a famous painting of a dodo and a zebra, all done by Mansur.
And you had portrait artists, too.
Yes, like Bishan Das and Abul Hassan. Jahangir famously claimed he could tell which artist painted which part of a single painting, even down to the eyebrow.
And we can't mention Jahangir without mentioning Nur Jahan.
An absolute powerhouse, his wife. She effectively ran the court for many years, part of what historians call the Nur Jahan junta. She had coins struck in her name. She influenced fashion, culture, and high politics.
Jahangir is also known for his chain of justice.
Yes, a golden chain with bells attached to the wall of the Agra fort. Anyone seeking justice could theoretically pull it and get the emperor's direct attention. A great piece of PR, if nothing else.
Then comes Shah Jahan, the builder. If Jahangir was about painting, Shah Jahan was all about architecture.
And notice the shift in material. Under Akbar and Humayun, we saw a lot of red sandstone. Think of Fatehpur Sikri or Humayun's tomb. It's powerful, it's masculine. Under Shah Jahan, we moved to pure, elegant white marble.
The Taj Mahal, the ultimate symbol.
The zenith of Mughal architecture, no question. But also the Red Fort in Delhi, the Jama Masjid, the Moti Masjid or Pearl Mosque in Agra. It's an explosion of marble and fine decoration.
There is a specific decorative technique used in the Taj Mahal that experts and examiners love to ask about. Pita dura.
Yes, it literally means hard stone in Italian. It's the technique of inlaying semi-precious stones, lapis lazuli, jade, crystal, carnelian, into the white marble to create these incredibly intricate floral designs. It's not just painting on the surface. The stones are cut and fitted perfectly into the marble itself.
It's beautiful, but it's also incredibly expensive.
Incredibly. And that brings us to the turning point. All this opulence comes at a cost. The tide begins to turn. Segment 5, Aurangzeb, 1658 to 1707.
The longest reign, and probably the most controversial period. Aurangzeb is a very complex figure.
He is. The text describes him as a zinda pir, a living saint. And in his personal life, he was. He was industrious, extremely disciplined, didn't drink, didn't have the lavish harem lifestyle of his predecessors. He even copied the Quran by hand and sewed prayer caps to earn his own keep.
He was very learned, too.
Yes, an expert in Arabic and Persian, but his policies marked a sharp and ultimately fatal reversal from the Akbar Jahangir Shah Jahan continuity.
Let's list the reversals. What did he change?
He reimposed the jizya tax on non-Muslims in 1679 after it had been abolished for over a century. He reimposed the pilgrim tax.
He banned music in the court.
He did, which is ironic because the text notes that the largest number of books on classical Indian music were actually written in Persian during his reign.
Why is that?
Probably because all the court musicians were now unemployed. They had to leave court and find other patrons, and they wrote down their knowledge to preserve it.
He also ended the Haroka Darshan, right? The practice of the emperor appearing to the public from the balcony.
Yes, he felt it was un-Islamic, too close to idol worship. And of course, the most controversial policy was the destruction of temples. The text explicitly mentions the new temples at Mathura and Benares being destroyed, and the execution of the 9th Sikh guru, Tegh Bahadur, for refusing to convert.
So these actions alienated the very people Akbar had worked so hard to integrate. The Rajputs, the Sikhs, the Chats. But his biggest problem wasn't in the north, it was in the south.
The Deccan ulcer.
Why do historians call it an ulcer?
Because it just slowly, painfully bled the empire dry. Aurangzeb spent the last 25 years of his life, from 1682 until his death in 1707, personally campaigning in the Deccan.
25 years away from the capital?
Yes. He was trying to crush the last of the Shia sultanates, Bijapur and Golconda, which he did. But his main obsession was crushing the rising power of the Marathas.
The Marathas, led by the legendary Shivaji.
Shivaji represents a new kind of threat. It wasn't about big set-piece battles. He was a master of guerrilla warfare. The Mughals were this heavy, slow-moving elephant. The Marathas were like a swarm of bees. They'd sting and disappear into the hills.
We have to mention the Treaty of Purander in 1665.
We do. It was a momentary success for the Mughals. Raja Jai Singh, a Rajput general acting for Aurangzeb, managed to surround Shivaji and forced him to sign the treaty, surrendering 23 of his forts.
But it didn't last. Shivaji escaped from house arrest in Agra and renewed the war.
He did. And the text gives a nod to Shivaji's own efficient administration, too, specifically the Ashtapradhan, or his Council of Eight Ministers.
And his revenue system.
Yes, he used the pathi, or a standard measuring rod, much like Sher Shah. The key takeaway here is that while Aurangzeb was winning battles and capturing forts in the Deccan, he was losing the war of attrition. The treasury was emptying, his best soldiers were dying, and the administration in North India was being completely neglected because the emperor was stuck in the south.
So the political structure is cracking under the strain. But what was life like for the average person during this whole period? Let's zoom into segment 6, Socio-Economic life. This is the section where those tricky prelims questions often hide.
Absolutely. Let's look at agriculture first. The population was estimated to be around 125 million by the end of the 16th century. Agriculture was generally prosperous. But here's a high-yield factoid for you. New crops.
What came in during the 17th century?
Tobacco and maize. These were introduced to India during this period, likely through contact with the Portuguese and other European traders.
Okay, that's a good one to remember. What about trade?
Trade was booming. The text lists various trading communities. You had the Seths and Boras doing long-distance trade, the Chetties on the Coromandel coast. But there is one specific group that the UPSC asked about directly in a PYQ.
The Banjaras.
Exactly, the Banjaras. Who were they?
I remember this question. The options were confusing.
They were, but the answer is right there in the textbook. The Banjaras were trader nomads. They specialized in carrying bulk goods, grain, salt, supplies for the army over very long distances on thousands of oxen.
So they were basically the logistics and supply chain of medieval India.
That's the perfect way to describe them. The PYQ asked to identify them, and the options had things like warriors or weavers. No, they were transporters, trader nomads.
That is such a specific detail, but it's right there. What about what was being traded?
India's main exports were high-value goods. Textiles, especially cotton, were huge. Spices, indigo, saltpeter, and what were we importing? Mainly horses from Central Asia and, crucially, bullion, gold and silver.
So India was a sink for the world's precious metals.
It was. We exported so much and imported relatively little in terms of manufactured goods that a steady stream of gold and silver flowed into the country to pay for our products.
But where did all that wealth go?
Well, a lot of it went to the nobility, the Mansabdars. The text describes their lifestyle as incredibly luxurious. Palatial homes, fine clothes, jewelry, huge households with hundreds of servants.
But remember the escheat system we mentioned.
Yes, this is the key. Because their wealth and property went back to the emperor on their death, there was no incentive to save or invest for the next generation.
Oh, they spent it.
They spent it all. It created a spend-it-all culture among the elite, which was great for artisans and craftsmen, but didn't lead to long-term capital formation.
Which brings us to the end. Segment 7, the causes of decline. Aurangzeb dies in 1707, and the whole magnificent structure just unravels remarkably fast.
Why? It wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of factors coming together, a systemic collapse.
So what were the big ones?
First, the religious intolerance we discussed. Aurangzeb's reversal of Akbar's policies alienated the support base. The Rajputs, who had been pillars of the empire, became hostile or indifferent. The Sikhs, Jats, and Satnamis were in open revolt.
Second, the financial bankruptcy from the Deccan Wars.
The Deccan ulcer, it just drained the treasury. There was no money left.
Third, and this is a bit more complex, the Jagirdari crisis.
Let's break that down. Remember, Mansabdars were paid with Jagirs, or land grants, but by the end of Aurangzeb's reign, there were too many nobles, too many Mansabdars being created.
And not enough good land to give them.
Exactly. Too many mouths, not enough pie. So there was a long wait for a Jagir. The officers who did have them weren't sure they'd keep them, so they squeezed the peasantry as hard as they could to get rich quick. This led to peasant revolts, which further ruined agriculture. It was a vicious cycle.
And then the vulture's circle. The empire is weak, and outsiders see their chance. Foreign invasions.
The knockout blows. Nadir Shah of Persia sacks Delhi in 1739. It was a massacre. He took the Peacock throne and the Koh-i-Noor diamond with him. Then Ahmad Shah Abdali of Afghanistan invades repeatedly. These invasions just shattered the myth of Mughal power. The emperor was shown to be weak, a puppet.
And you have weak successors, too. The later Mughals were just a shadow of their ancestors.
A very pale shadow.
So, to recap our journey today, we started with the foundation under Babur, built on gunpowder and brilliant tactics. We saw the consolidation under Akbar, using alliances and a sophisticated administration.
The golden age of statesmanship.
We reached the cultural peak under Jahangir and Shah Jahan, a world of painting and marble.
The height of opulence.
And finally, we saw the overextension and collapse under Aurangzeb, driven by Deccan wars and rigid orthodoxy.
It's a classic rise and fall arc, an epic story. But before we sign off, I want to leave the listeners with a provocative thought, a what-if question to ponder.
Go for it. I'm all ears.
We've talked about artillery, cavalry, forts, and roads. But what's the one military branch we haven't mentioned at all?
The Navy.
The Navy. The Mughals were a continental land-based power. They essentially ignored the sea. They had a massive coastline, huge trade exports, but they let the Portuguese, then the Dutch, the French, the English control the Indian Ocean.
They just saw the sea as a highway for trade, not a frontier to be defended.
Exactly. So here's the thought. If the Mughals, with all their wealth and resources, had invested in a strong blue water navy, could the European colonization of India have been prevented? Or, at the very least, would the British East India Company have been able to gain a foothold so easily?
It's a huge question of strategic vision. They were always looking north, back to Central Asia, but the real threat and the real future was coming from the sea.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
That is a solid point to ponder. History isn't just about what happened, it's about the choices that were made and the roads not taken.
And for you, the learner, the choice is to take this information and apply it. Don't just memorize the term Pietra Dura. Understand it reflects the stability and immense wealth of Shah Jahan's era. Don't just memorize Zat and Sawar. Understand they represent the delicate balance of status and military obligation that held the entire empire together.
Perfectly put.
Context is everything.
All right, that's a wrap on our deep dive into the Mughal Empire. A quick reminder, if you want the detailed notes for this specific episode, including tables comparing the different administrative systems, head over to our public Telegram channel. It's free.
And for the premium experience with model answers for mains and all our videos in one place, join the private library. Just DM us.
And please, if this deep dive helped you clarify your concepts, support Simplified UPSC by PPP on Patreon. It truly keeps us going.
Like, share, and subscribe. And most importantly, good luck with your prep.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.